as we get near the end, if you guys have any specific questions or even throughout the presentation, feel free to chime in. So I'll turn it over to you, Greg. Thanks again, Greg, for hopping on here.
I will share my screen. I'm assuming everybody can see that okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. I'm just getting it all fixed up here. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. I'm not used to doing presentations via Zoom. It's much easier in person where you can read personalities and gestures to know if you're interesting or not, I guess you could say, but I'm just going to move forward. I'll be pretty loose on things, so if anybody has a question, you can unmute yourself and please ask as we go along. I'm really going to focus on brain and body health today. We've learned a lot by owning and operating our own Alzheimer and dementia care community, and we've invested a lot of time in learning what we can do as Americans to push back against cognitive decline over the years. And so I'm not sure if everybody realizes the power of our brain, that it actually controls every aspect of our life. And it's incredible. It's only 3 pounds and it acts like a mini universe for us. And it processes over 70,000 thoughts per day using 100 billion neurons and 500 trillion connections. And it's through those neurological connections that it forms memories, thoughts, and feelings. But yet, as Americans, we tend to abuse our brain by the little decisions that we make every day. And so some of the decisions that we decide to do are stuff like this: lazing around, watching TV, eating snacks that aren't good for us instead of getting out and exercising and being active. Or we choose something like this over dining in our own kitchens and purchasing food that is farm fresh and removed of preservatives and additives. Or we decide to have breakfast of champions versus something like this. This is actually good for you and fuels your body, your heart, and your brain. We decide to drink stuff like this versus, water, which even water, there's so much science that goes into water, different types of water. They even say purified water is not good for us. Having the minerals and things that come in it naturally are most beneficial for us. Or, vegetable and fruit drinks that are fresh made from natural ingredients. Or we decide to snack on something like this versus something like that. So the little decisions that we make day in and day out tend to play havoc on the function of our brain. And the good news about it, and I will tell you, as Americans, we have a recipe for disaster for brain health because we don't sleep well, we're overstressed, we eat horribly, fast foods, and we sit a lot. We become very sedentary. We go to work, we sit at work, we go home, we sit and watch TV. And those types of decisions on a daily basis tend to impact our brain health. And so I'd like to share some of the misunderstandings about brain health and cognitive decline. Some of the things that I hear, especially owning and operating an Alzheimer's dementia care, is that people don't know a lot about the functionality and the resilience of your brain, but a lot of people think that, you know, my brain is what it is and I can't do anything about it. Well, that is just not true. And then a lot of our families that come to us is really worried about, hey, I'm forgetful. Does that mean I have dementia? Just because you're forgetful doesn't mean that you have some form of dementia or even cognitive decline. That can be caused by stress, body ailments, different things like that. Aging always equals cognitive decline. Well, that's not true either. You can minimize your decline. It is true there's a certain amount of cognitive decline that comes with aging, but if you live the right lifestyle, you can mitigate most of that. Dementia is a death sentence. We hear that a lot. I know a lot of people that decided to live the right lifestyle and push back against their dementia, and they die of old age and not the disease. So just because you get diagnosed with dementia doesn't mean that's what you're going to die from. Dementia is hereditary. In reality, only 4% of dementia cases go back to genetics. So heredity and dementia are not necessarily connected, or in a very small case. Drugs can reverse the effects of dementia. We have spent literally billions on top of billions of dollars and had zero success on reversing the effects of dementia. So don't think that we're going to develop a magic pill. It's got to be a multimodal approach in order to push back against dementia. And then the one that hurts my heart the most is I'm better off not knowing. And I sort of parallel this to how cancer was maybe 20, 25, 30 years ago. When somebody got diagnosed with cancer, they pretty much passed away. Whereas we started learning through the years is early detection gives you the power to fight back and prevent a lot of deaths of cancer. Well, dementia and cognitive decline is just the same. The earlier you detect cognitive decline and the quicker you start making lifestyle changes, the more you can push back against the decline itself. So why should we care? It's really comes down to the daily decisions that we make impact cognitive performance. So I just wanted to sort of bring up some of the early symptoms of dementia, just because people get concerned about it, especially if they have a family member that dealt with it, a mom or a dad or both, as they start aging. And once again, I go back to start losing their keys. They get very worried about, do I have dementia or not? Well, there's basically 3 stages of dementia: early, mid, and late stage. And I'll go through each one of those stages and sort of explain what are some of the symptoms. The earlier stage dementia, it's very gradual. This could take over the course of 10 years before it really gets progressive and aggressive. You start noticing forgetfulness, losing track of time, or becoming lost in familiar places, you know, heading down to the grocery store or to the local gas station and having difficulty getting back home. I had a friend of mine that his mother got on the 270 loop and looped around for about 3 hours before calling her son, asking her what exit she needed to get off to get home. The mid stage, some of the symptoms there definitely become more clear and more restricting. They definitely become more forgetful. It's typically affecting the hippocampus, the dementia is. And so that's sort of your memory center, especially for your short-term memory. And so you start forgetting things that you just spoke about. You start asking repeating questions. You also can become lost at home. we had my grandmother-in-law living with us the last 4 years, and she has Alzheimer's. And it was interesting. She had a certain pattern within the house. As soon as she would get out of that pattern, then she would get confused as to how to get back to her bedroom or how to find the bathroom. Difficulty communicating related to sentence structure or memory of particular words. Needing help for personal care. This is more early stage help, maybe some bathing, maybe setting out clothes, not necessarily toileting at that point, medication, definitely those types of personal care needs. And then experiencing behavioral changes. That this is where you can start getting in trouble, or your loved one getting in trouble, where all of a sudden you might find a loved one out at the road waiting for the bus stop or waiting for a friend to come pick them up, or they find them down the street just sort of wandering through the neighborhood. And then, like I mentioned before, repeating the same question or telling the same story within a few minutes of one another. So that would be the mid stage. And then late stage, it's abrupt. You know it. There's physical signs. There's emotional signs. There's it's just a very stressful, undeniable situation. And in fact, they become very unaware of time and space. They start to wander constantly through spaces. They have difficulty recognizing family and friends, sons and daughters. And it's usually at these stages that it is more difficult on the family than it is on the person suffering with the disease, because they're in the middle of it and the family just sees how degrading it is. And then also in real high need for personal care, bathing and toileting, to the point where feeding becomes a need as well. Difficulty walking, they become very rigid and slow in their movement. And then also behavioral changes. And in this stage, you can tend to get a little bit more aggressive in your behavior. And even the sweetest, like my grandmother-in-law, she was a lady pretty much to the very end, but at the very end, she'd grab your hand and she'd try to bite you. And so it even had made her a little bit more aggressive than she would normally be. So there are 175 different dementias. Dementia is sort of the umbrella, and then the different types of dementias fall under that umbrella. The most diagnosed dementia is Alzheimer's, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. And it's anywhere from 60 to 70% of the diagnosis. Now, there still isn't a real strong way to do actual diagnosis. You typically get it through behavior, because it affects, each dementia affects different parts of the brains, and you can tell by behavior if it's a balance issue, a sight issue, emotional issue, memory issue. That's how you can sort of depict which dementia it might be. But they will do what they call an amyloid test. So the amyloid plaque is what builds up in your brain with Alzheimer's. But the test itself might show that you have amyloid, but even a healthy brain has a certain amount of amyloid plaque in it, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have Alzheimer's. But that is one test that they do, but it's not 100% proven reliable. So the other ones are vascular dementia, 20%, dementia with Lewy bodies. That often comes hand in hand with Parkinson's. So typically, if you have somebody that's been diagnosed with Parkinson's and then some type of dementia, it's usually Lewy bodies. Frontal temporal lobe dementia, and then the remaining small percentage is mixed, which is sort of that other, 170 different dementias. So when they go to try to make a cure through pharma, they're usually focusing on a specific type of dementia. So even if you come up with something for vascular or Lewy bodies or something like that, you still have all these other types of dementias that you have to deal with. So there's never going to be just this one pill that fixes dementia for us.
Hey, Greg.
Yes.
It's Phil. Hey, just to go back briefly on this, the stages and, what you're starting to look through at each stage. Do you, with your guys' experience, I mean, is there a certain age range where that starts to become more prevalent, or is that,
Yeah,
is there data behind that?
that's a good question. Well, we've had people, in fact, I just had a gentleman pass away that was darn near my age, 57, and passed away from dementia. And they're not sure exactly what dementia it was. So I highly recommend that you really start paying attention to your cognition at age 45, and you actually start doing cognitive assessments at age 45. And as often as you get a physical, you should get a cognitive checkup. And if you start seeing decline, you either you yourself figure out what's the best path for you, or you go to a specialist that can help you optimize brain cognition. So Kempers have had 48-year-olds in their building, but commonly you're 65 and older, but we're seeing more and more diagnosis of under 55 than ever before. And it all has to do with lifestyle.
That's great. And then do you find that most people are starting to figure this out like in the first stage, like people are starting to realize they've got an issue, or does it usually have to progress beyond that before people are kind of starting to self-identify or family members are identifying?
Still a lot of denial is going on, especially because this is, it's just like cancer. It's one of those diseases that nobody asks for this, and it's devastating for not only the person with it, but the family. And so you tend to be in a lot of denial. And my whole vision, the reason why I do presentations like this, is to educate Central Ohio to recognize early stage issues and then seek help as early as possible so that you can take action. Because I can tell you this, that you can do things in your life right now to reverse some of the effects of dementia. So yeah, but we're still sort of in that beginning stage where people don't think they can do anything about it. So they sweep it under the rug until an episode happens. So most of our residents move in because of an episode. Mom or dad goes to the hospital and the hospital says they are not safe to go back home. You have 3 days to figure out where you're going to put them. And then we get that call and we have 3 days to prep for them. So that is still common practice. It's one of the biggest mistakes families make, is not recognizing it early on and then taking action immediately. Usually it's the person, because they're aware what's going on at those stages, and they're usually not willing to admit to it. And so they'll either fight, going and taking action, or the family ignores it.
Great. I mean to cut you off. I just thought that was
No,
good
thank you.
info. If anybody else throughout the presentation has a question come up, feel free to chime in. So
Keep
thanks,
doing
Greg.
that. It makes it for a much better presentation anyways. So why do we care? I was just talking about that because the decisions, the lifestyle decisions that we make on a daily basis impact it. Regardless if we have dementia or not, you can have optimum. In fact, I have an 86-year-old here at Kemper House, and the only reason they moved into our community was to fight back against the disease, because we're doing all the things that we're going to be talking about to fight back, to potentially reverse in some cases, and it has been proven that you can reverse. And there's a number of doctors out there that have cases. I mean, it's absolutely re-engineering everything you do in your life, but they've been able to show that they've been able to grow brain matter under the right condition. And the guy or the person that's here at Kemper House, he's so intelligent that he has Lewy bodies, and he should, by all rights, not be functioning. And he is fully functioning because he has so much reserve brain power that he's been able to create new pathways around his issues. And so we're fighting back like heck against the disease for him at 86, and he's not giving up, and it's awesome. Am I going backwards? Yeah, I guess I am. Sorry. Wait a second. Oh, okay, here we are. So we were talking about the different dementias and how they affect different parts of the brain. And I just wanted to show you that the reason why a community, a memory care community can start self-diagnosing for our residents what type of dementia they have is because the certain types or parts of your brain dictate the behaviors and functionality. So if you're affecting the temporal lobe, you know that your hearing and learning and feelings are going to be affected. If it's called a hippocampus, which is in your temporal lobe. If you're having memory issues, it's usually related to your hippocampus, your cerebellum. If you're having balance issues or coordination issues, and different types of dementia start affecting different parts of your brain. And we can see that in behavior, and it helps us to sort of understand what the dementia is. And then it gives us a better path to help them push back against the disease once you know what it is. I'll only share a little bit about Alzheimer's because it is the most diagnosed. And this, if you look at the left of the slide, that is a healthy brain. If you look at the right of the slide, that is a brain with Alzheimer's. And really, the only true way you can figure out what type of dementia is at autopsy after the fact with brain slices. And it shows what areas are degraded. And so you can see there's little circles, the little shriveled up thing on the right-hand side, the lower part of the brain, that's the hippocampus. And you can see how shriveled up that is. So that's your memory center. So when that starts shriveling up, now you typically with Alzheimer's, you keep your long-term memory the longest. And so you start noticing repeating of questions, telling the same stories. That's because that short-term memory ability is gone. And then also after a while, the cerebral cortex is starting to deteriorate, and that's when you start having language skills, executive decision issues of reasoning, those types of things, social issues of anger and frustration. And it is frustrating because you can hear something, you are connected to a word, but you can't quite understand its meaning. And that's where you see true frustration happen. And as a family member, you have to recognize that. And so you just give little bits of information at a time when you're dealing with your loved one with Alzheimer's. So, you don't go, hey, go open the door, come in the building and do this. You would say, hey, Dad, go to the door, open the door. And so you walk them through simple steps. And so if you can get a diagnosis, it really does help family members manage the disease better. And then eventually, Alzheimer's and most dementias take away the memory to the point where your body forgets how to breathe, and then you pass. So what do we know about Alzheimer and dementia? Alzheimer is the 6th leading cause of death in the US. 1 in 3 seniors die with some form of dementia, so it's prevalent. 5.7 Americans with Alzheimer's are projected, and then it's supposed to get to 14 million by 2050. It's really the only major disease category, meaning dementia, that is projected to grow over the next 40 years. Every other major disease category, cancer, heart issues, those types of things are because the medical and pharma fields are catching up with it. They feel that they can mitigate that over the years, whereas dementia, they feel they can't. They haven't figured it out yet. And then here's that statement that more than 500,000 Americans under age 65 have some form of dementia. So we're never too young to start worrying about cognition. Also, it's funny when you poll seniors, their biggest fear of health issues is Alzheimer's. It outweighs cancer, stroke, heart disease, diabetes, and arthritis combined. And so it's a real concern. And the good part is we can do something about it. So how do we love our brain? So there's really 6 pillars to that of brain health. We start with food and nutrition. Physical exercise is extremely important. Medical health, staying on top of heart disease and different types of ailments are important. A healthier heart is a healthier brain. And so, paying attention to that is important for your cognition. Sleep and relaxation, mental fitness, and then social interaction. Depression is a big issue with seniors because as they age and as they have more difficulty hearing and ambulating, the more secluded they get, and not being socially active can really bring on dementia quicker than anything else. I'll use Kemper House as an example here that we pay attention to these 6 pillars. And so not only do we pay attention to it in our home, you need to pay attention to it in your home. And the earlier you start really paying attention to nutrition and physical exercise and medical health and sleep and relaxation and mental fitness and social interaction, the better you're going to be as you age. So some of the things, there's a number of causes for cognitive decline. Now, I'm not just talking about dementia, I'm talking about cognitive decline, because just because you're forgetful and you have cognitive decline doesn't mean that you have dementia. And so there's things like cardiovascular or metabolic issues like diabetes and hypertension that can cause cognitive decline. If you can get those under control, you can improve your cognition, brain function. Maybe it's a neurological disorder or it's a trauma that you've had to your head, a concussion. Concussions, there's direct connections between concussions and dementia. Poor lifestyle habits, unhealthy diet, lack of social stimulation, those types of things. And then just other things that affect it are thyroid issues and being over medicated. Most of our residents come to us with 10 or more medications, and half of them are probably not necessary. So the first thing we look at is, do they need that medication to survive? And if they don't, we DC it, we discontinue it. And we almost get all of our residents down to 4 medications. And what ends up happening is when you have so many medications, they start playing against one another, and there's all these bad side effects, and they play havoc on cognition. You have to look at diet. 3 things that you need to immediately do is remove processed ingredients from your food, which means you can't go to McDonald's and you can't go to these fast food places. You have to purchase it yourself. You shouldn't be eating white sugar and white flour. There's no nutritional benefit for you. In fact, there's chemicals in that impact cognition. Remove preservatives and additives. Really, I mean, Worthington Farmers Market is the perfect opportunity to eat right. You know, it's sort of eating like our grandparents used to eat. And then read ingredients. The FDA is not protecting us. If you can't pronounce it, don't put it in your body. One of the things we use at Kemper House is, we call it the Mind Diet. It's a combination of the Mediterranean and DASH diet. It's all focused on brain and body health. And so some of the things you should eat are berries and poultry, fish, wild caught fish, not farm raised fish, whole grains, those types of things. Some of the things you have to avoid, which I love, are like butter and cheese and red meats. And you can eat some red meats. If you do eat red meat, you want to make sure that it is grass-fed. Grass-fed beef is actually healthy for you. The stuff that we buy at the grocery store is typically injected with chemicals and steroids, and it's not. And then don't eat fried foods, even though they're delicious. Physical exercise. It's what we talk about is sort of a multimodal approach. And so not only do you want to physically exercise, you also want to exercise your brain. So we gamify a lot of things. So while our residents are working out, they might be watching a screen that makes them count backwards or do different things or match things on a screen. So it's sort of the 1 + 1 = 3, that synergistic moment actually creates higher outcomes for cognition. The most important thing, though, about brain health and fitness is you have to raise your heart rate, because that improves blood flow and oxygen to your brain. And it's in those moments, if you challenge your cognition, that you'll get your best results to improve your cognition. Just some of the equipment that's out there that you can purchase, a CyberCycle, just this one piece of machinery, they've been able to reduce progression of mild cognitive impairment by 23%. We actually have this bike at Kemper House. Just so you know, when COVID isn't here, we open our gym, which fights against all the different comorbidities that seniors deal with, anything from gait issues to balance issues, swallowing issues, bone density issues, and cognitive decline. And Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11 to 1, that general public can come in and use our gym for free. Another piece of equipment is called Core Balance. It works on 3 different areas of your brain. It helps with your optics. It helps with your equilibrium balance, and then also your motor skills. Just this one machine. So some of the things that are easy that you can do at home to really improve cognition is singing. So you got to think about anything that's challenging you outside of the norm is good for cognition. So sitting and reading, because it's so rote and you know what the words are, that's not improving cognition. It's something that's really creating in your mind, like playing a new instrument, learning a new language, doing arts and crafts, logic puzzles, jigsaw puzzles, Sudoku, those types of things that are really challenging you cognitively and you can do this actually while you're exercising too. If you're sitting there riding, spinning on a bike or whatever, and you're doing some of these other things, that can add in that multimodal stuff that you can do at home. There's also computer-based cognitive games like Brain Q and Sharp Brains and Private Eye, those types of things that are really a powerful way to build cognition as well. And then some of the things you need to shed from your, shed from your life is avoid tobaccos. You know, alcohol to a certain degree can be good. You know, a wine a day, red wine a day, they say is good for you. Possibly a beer a day is not bad for you, but just don't be excessive about it. Make sure that you're always wearing head protection. I just started rollerblading with my son. And so I look like the biggest geek. I have the helmet, the knee pads, elbow pads, and wrist pads, but I'm protected. So protect your brain from damage. Being socially connected. So if mom or dad are really isolating themselves in their home, I highly recommend to get them out to places like the Griswold. Obviously right now you can't, but you can still be connected via Zoom and they're still doing stuff, but it's super important for cognitive health and avoiding depression and all that kind of stuff. And then, you know, getting cognitive checkups like we discussed earlier, starting at age 45, as often as you get a physical checkup, get a cognitive checkup and stay on top of that. If you start seeing decline, then you can come and talk to me and I can put you in touch with the right people to fight back against whatever's going on.
Hey, Greg, it's Phil. Maybe just approaching, since I'm approaching that 45
Yep.
category, where do you often recommend people start like the cognitive assessment or getting those checkups?
Yeah, so there is a wellness center here in Worthington. And do you know what it's called? Oh my gosh, I can't remember her name. Dr. Katie works there. Well, one of the ways you can do it is through us. So we have a Cogniview, and it's the first and world's most advanced computerized cognitive risk assessment machine. And we do it for free. I do it to just help people get ahead of it. And so it's a 10-minute assessment. It assesses 6 functions of cognition, and then it aggregates a number between 1 and 100. And depending on where you land on that, sort of tells you what your cognition is based on a national average. And that's something that you could come in every year or every couple years and do with us, and we can just log it and stay track of it. And then if we find that there's some issues, then I can recommend you places from there. There's also, you know, you can get online and you can do a SAGE test. You can look that up, and it's sort of it's by Dr. Shari, who's at OSU, and it's a self-examination. It's very limited. The Cogniview is very extensive and in-depth, and then there's also MoCA and Mini Mental that you can do as well. Each of those, you would probably have to get those two, you'd have to go to a neurologist to get. So this is the end of it, really, right here. The 6 things that you should do immediately is get at least 8 hours of sleep, maximum 12, it says, yeah, maximum 12 hours. Meditation is really powerful for cognition, making sure that you're eating right for your brain, following that mind diet. You're doing the right body fitness of combining aerobic with weights, and then also brain fitness in addition to your body fitness, and then just staying socially active. And that's all I have. So are there any questions?
Greg, a question I had, are you seeing more more issues or more people that are being diagnosed because of all this this isolation because of COVID?
No, no, no. No, I think the diagnosis is, it's been, are you talking about under age 65?
No, not necessarily. The reason I ask is I have a mother-in-law who is, I think at least a couple years ago, she voluntarily decided that she would be safer to move from her home into a continuing care facility, even though she was very independent. But just in the last 2 or 3 months, we've noticed a decline. And part of it is, I mean, she's living in a place where they are highly, high restrictions for any social interaction whatsoever. They're not allowed to interact with each other anymore. They're not allowed to interact with family. No family's allowed to come in. They're not allowed to leave. And if they do, then they have to self isolate in their apartments for 2 weeks and things like that. And we've noticed a kind of a decline a little bit.
Yeah, COVID has accelerated aging in senior environment, any place where they're isolated. That isolation is horrible. It's depressing, and it's really hard on people emotionally, mentally, and physically. And so that in itself is very difficult. And we're fortunate in a dementia care, because we're a locked down neighborhood, we can't really put our residents in our room. We still have to group them together, and we're a COVID-free building, so we're blessed for that. But we're trying to keep them as entertained and active as we possibly can. But a lot of assisted livings have had to just isolate them to their rooms pretty much, without a lot of life enrichment moments, and it is super hard. And so yes, you're right, that is accelerated the onset. If she was apt to having dementia or just aging in itself. I mean, they show images of somebody 3 months ago and the way they look now, and they look like they've aged 10 years. I've seen it in our families. It's unbelievable. Yeah, so COVID has had a huge impact on that.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Greg, I neglected to ask you before the call, but there's obviously a ton of good resources on those slides you went over. Is there would I be able to share those with people on the call? Yep. For a future reference? I can get that emailed out to everybody, this week sometime maybe.
Yep, I'll send that stuff out to you.
Okay, awesome. Anybody else have any questions, or if you think of anything throughout the week, certainly I can put you in touch with Greg or the Kemper House. They've got a lot of good resources that the community here in Worthington's really benefited from.
It really is. Our whole goal is to educate so that you might be able to keep somebody out of a building like ours, because it's not a fun disease, and if we can fight back against it early enough, we can do that.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we're getting close to the hour, and I don't look like we have any other questions. So Greg, thank you very much. That was really informative. Several notes I jotted down here that I was unaware of, in particular that, everything you read and hear about is how, medicine is going to, we're in the medieval stages of medicine, and we've got all this optimism, but it doesn't seem like that optimism is shared with dementia and Alzheimer's. And so it sounds like we really need to take hold of it ourselves with some of these other ways to fight against it.
Yep, it really comes down to lifestyle, makes the biggest impact over and.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. I think you said you were recording this and we could get that out to some people as well. Yep. So appreciate your time and expertise, Greg. Thank you. Thanks everyone for jumping on.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.